I know too much. I have stuffed too many of the facts of history and science into my intellectuals. My eyes have grown dim over books, believing in geological periods, cave dwellers, Chinese dynasties, and the fixed stars have prematurely aged me. Logan Purcell Smith, 1865, 1946.
What is our fascination with trivia? Where did it come from? What separates trivia from all of the other mountains of information we consume every day? In order to understand what something is, we have to look back to where it begins and what molded it into what it is now. Trivia, as defined by Oxford, is a noun that means details, considerations, or pieces of information of little importance or value. It actually comes from the Latin word trivialis, meaning found everywhere or commonplace. It can also mean that which is in or belongs to the crossroads or public streets. It was the plural of the word trivium, which meant the place where three roads meet. What is interesting is legends and rumors say the word trivia come from the idea of travelers meeting at the intersection of three crossroads to exchange news, gossip, and interesting bits of information. So basically, the office water cooler. The idea of roads and knowledge also links to universities of old, where the three basic courses of the 7 liberal arts were grammar, logic, and rhetoric, and were also called the trivium. The remaining 4 higher level courses, called the quadrivium, were geometry, arithmetic, astronomy, and music. So the classical education of grammar, logic, and rhetoric were the 3 roads of basic education and were always pursued first. Trivia, by the way, is also the Latin name for the Greek goddess Hecate, who is the goddess of crossroads, among other things. So trivia holds its roots in basic education, crossroads, and goddesses. Okay, so how did we get from there to knowing it for what we do now? Fun bits of facts and information that we use to wow our friends or make us say, well, I never knew that. What turned trivia into what it is now? In order not to dive too deep into the full history of trivia itself due to time constraints, let's go over the highlights here. In the 15th to 16th century, the adjective trivial appeared with ties to all of its Latin meanings. There was mention of the word arte triviale in an English translation of Ranulph Higden, speaking about the aforementioned liberal arts foundations of studies. The adjective trivial, introduced into English in the 15th and 16th century, was influenced by all 3 meanings of the Latin adjective. 16th century writings describe things as trite, commonplace, unimportant, and slight. Even Shakespeare's work reflects this thought on information that isn't necessarily important. Moving forward towards the 18th and 19th centuries, these bits of information and facts became a game to be played in the parlors socially. It wasn't until the 19th century, though, that trivia, as we know it, took on a life of its own. In 1902, Logan Purcell Smith really took it up a notch when he wrote the book Trivia. He followed that with More Trivia and All Trivia in 1921 and 1933. Trivia started being known as fun facts due heavily to Smith's 1902 trivia book. Moving forward, a trivia game debuted on the radio program Take It or Leave It in the 1940s. The 50s brought about very popular trivia quiz shows such as the $64,000 Question, Dotto, and 21. All of them were extremely popular. Trivia proved that it was something people couldn't get enough of. However, in 1959, it was revealed that the show's producers were feeding the contestants answers. This came to be known as the 1950s quiz show scandals. However, the scandals in the 50s didn't deter the general populace from their desire for trivia. For example, Dan Karlinski and Ed Goodgold, who also published a book called Trivia, were the first organizers of the Quiz Bowl competitions for Columbia University, also in the 50s. In 1964, trivia took center stage again in Americans' homes when a television show created by Merv Griffin hit the airwaves. It was a show you may have heard of called Jeopardy! I didn't even know Jeopardy existed that early until my research into this. Here's a little bit of trivia about the show as well for you. The original host was Art Fleming. The original version of Jeopardy premiered on NBC on March 30th, 1964 and ran until 1975. The show was revived in 1978 for 21 weeks with a slightly different format. The current version of Jeopardy premiered in 1984, hosted by Alex Trebek, and is currently running in syndication to this day. Alex hosted from 1984 until he unfortunately passed away in 2020 at 80 years old. He hosted it for an incredible 37 seasons. Jeopardy finally settled on champion Ken Jennings as its sole host after having Ken and Mia Bialik share guest host spots for a while. Rewinding a bit back to 1979, another trivia legend was also born. On the 15th of December, two former newsmen were throwing back some beers and playing Scrabble when they came up with the idea for their own board game. It was on this day that the idea of Trivial Pursuit was born. It has sold over 100 million copies and is still one of the most popular board games of all time. By the way, I noticed something interesting about the Trivial Pursuit game board that no one else has seemed to mention, or at least not that I found personally. It is said that the design is based on a ship's wheel, but it looks like something else to me. It looks like three roads converging. Sound familiar? Did I just discover a hidden secret? Or did I just come up with a great retcon for the game design? Hey, somebody call Hasbro. I think we're onto something. Just remember, you heard it here first. Anyway, back to our story. The trend of trivia nights, quiz games, and the like has continued on with trivia nights at your local bar or pub, restaurants that have game pads, and even airlines offer trivia games you can play against other passengers. I've won a few myself. Trivia games have become popular with video games as well, such as Jackbox games and many more. As we can see, trivia and trivia games aren't going anywhere. So all of this history shows that trivia itself is anything but useless bits of information. We have a deep desire to know about the little things that hold us together as a species. We want to know who built a famous structure, why bumblebees can fly, and which year something was invented. We have a desire to know who voiced a well-known cartoon character, what great war general said a quote, and who invented shoelaces. It was a guy in 1790. Look him up. We want to know what all of this information is because it reminds us of who we are, how wide and deep our world goes, and that we live in a universe full of amazing facts and wonder. It's full of stories that tell us we're not just tiny cogs in a giant machine. It sparks our imagination and awe at nature, the human mind, and the distances we can achieve with the human spirit. These little bits of information and these little slivers of knowledge keep our minds alive and active. It's our way to rapid-fire history lessons, science facts, and social studies. It gives us something to connect to with each other on a daily basis, whether it be friends, family, co-workers, or a stranger we may just meet at a crossroads somewhere in our lives. I think it's how we continue to share who we are with each other. I think it's vital to the survival and advancement of the human race, and I think that's pretty important, even if others find it trivial. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Trivial, and we look forward to seeing you back in the future as we begin this journey of sharing interesting, inspiring, and fun trivia with you. We're not on a set schedule right now, so make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming episodes. Thanks again, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Trivial.